Good morning and afternoon, and welcome to the Movement Cafe. Just really glad to see folks coming on in. This is a wonderful cafe. I live in Oregon in the Pacific Northwest. My name is Rashinda Fairhurst, and I work with a wonderful team for the Movement Cafe. Today, Don Lewis and I will be the ones to email, to text or send a message to if you need anything during the cafe. And Kathy Velasquez Everhart will be back for cafe next week. So today we're going to be talking with Reverend Dr. Elaine Heath, and so I know that that many folks are just really look forward to every one of her books. She's published multiple books, and looking forward to those whenever they come out. I'm one of those. And in a minute, I'm going to be introducing her. And before I do that, though, I want to invite you to introduce yourselves. Um, Go ahead and you chat. I live in Oregon. Yesterday we had quite the windstorm. That bomb cyclone off our coast is super fun. It's going to be dumping a lot of snow. I can see snow in the hills right now. So yeah, so maybe there's something going on where you live as well. But please feel free to add into the chat your name, where you're from, what your interests are. If you have a question for Elaine, she might even be able to get there and answer that question. So we don't know. We're just so glad to have her here, and we know that in her heart she attends to so many things in faith contexts. That just her presence being here is a blessing for all of us, and I'm glad. So this is the point where I usually pass over to Kathy to say a little bit about the United Methodist Creation Justice Movement, but maybe I'll let Pat do that this time. So I'm going to pass it over to Reverend Pat Watkins and ask him, hey, you want to tell us a little bit about this thing we call the United Methodist Creation Justice Movement?
Sure. And I'm a little nervous, I guess, because I'm filling in for Kathy, and she she does such a great job of all of this stuff. Um, so the United Methodist Creation Justice Movement was started several years ago. I always like to say, in an effort to bring together all the pieces of creation care ministries happening throughout the denomination. Almost all the general boards and agencies now have some degree of sustainability, some emphasis on sustainability. And those of us who have been about this movement for a long time felt as if we needed some kind of an umbrella organization just sort of to hold all of that together, because we didn't want everybody to be working in their own silos without connecting with each other. So that was one reason we created the creation justice movement for the denomination, is simply to be connected to all of these different pieces of environmental ministry going on. And the other reason is because the longer we're in this ministry, the more intersectionalities there are with all kinds of different social justice pieces. And so that was another reason we needed to form some kind of umbrella organization, so we could connect to all the environmental ministries going on within the denomination, but connect to all the other justice ministries going on as well, because they are so connected with each other. So that's who we are. We have a leadership team, and we have several sort of subcommittees within the movement doing local church things, annual conference things, jurisdictional things, advocacy pieces, agriculture pieces, solar stuff. Fossil-free UMC is a part of this umbrella organization. So it's a really cool thing that we're doing as a part of the United Methodist Church. And it's great that the church is doing a pretty good job. It probably could do a better job, but doing a pretty good job of being supportive of this movement. It is a growing movement. I always like to say 20 years ago, I could count on one hand the number of people in the United Methodist Church that are doing this work. And now there's thousands of us, most of whom I have no idea who they are. So this movement is really becoming a very, very vital part of the ministry and mission of the United Methodist Church. How'd I do, Rashinda?
That's wonderful. Yes, exactly. And I echo that enthusiasm. It's like, is that cool or what? I also like checking out the chat. There's a lot of new Earth Keepers in that chat. And there's a lot. Raise your hand if you're an Earth Keeper, either freshly last night or yeah, we got a lot of Earth Keepers. And Kim, yes, I saw your note that you were commissioned last night too, and Karen's an Earth Keeper. Karen is. So I was going to say, where's Jonathan? Jonathan, can you just, I think we got a minute to give to you today that I'd love to have you share a little bit about Earth Keepers for anybody who, on this call who isn't an Earth Keeper and hasn't heard about Earth Keeping. All right, Pat, back to you for 2 seconds on the Earth Keepers. You want to just say, because Pat was instrumental in getting that started.
So Earth Keepers started at the end of 2016 as a training program. It's housed in the General Board of Global Ministries. The reason why Earth Keepers was created was because we had been hearing from people over the years who are interested in doing something in terms of creation care within the church. And what we gleaned from those conversations was that we knew a fair amount about the science of climate change and other environmental issues. We knew a little bit of theology. We knew some things about advocacy, but what we didn't really know how to do was to organize a community around a particular project involved in the environment. In other words, we didn't really know how to go into our communities and identify the environmental problems and then resource the communities both financially and in terms of finding all these experts out there to come together to solve those problems. And so that was the genesis of Earth Keepers, to try to train people in how to do that. And so that's what we do. And we make them do a project. We like them to come to training with a project that they're already working on, or either a well thought out idea for a project. And then when they come for training, Earth Keepers will help them flesh out and figure out how to make that project a reality. And so all of our Earth Keepers come, at least when they come out of their training, they come out with the project in mind.
To do in their own community.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and there's a lot of it's just a good program, and it's a nice community, and it continues to grow. So I would, if you're an Earth Keeper here and you would like to share a little bit about your projects, because sometimes those projects are super fun. That's another thing that you could do for the chat is just share with others what project you might have going as an Earth Keeper, and in keeping in line with some of the themes from that'll be here today, including like being on the land and integrating sort of living on earth with being a person of faith. I know there's a number of folks that are working on gardens and that sort of thing in the Earth Keeper program, so feel free to share. Okay, so at this point, I do want to turn to introducing Elaine, and I've got an introduction here I'd like to share with you. And I also am myself very much one of Elaine's, I guess you could say, fangirls. The Mystic Way of Evangelism is her very grown-up book for us adult pastors, really struggling to figure out how to really bring church into the here and now. What does it mean to be here right now and connect with the spirituality of our faith, right? And my personal favorite, the book of Phoebe. It's actually called Naked Faith, but I'm going to call it the book of Phoebe. Phoebe Palmer is our own Methodist saint in many ways, and her story is marvelous, and Elaine shares it with us in this. Okay, and now for the more formal introduction. Reverend Elaine Heath is an ordained UMC elder now serving as an abbess at Spring Forest, a new monastic community in rural North Carolina. She serves with others tending to the forest and small farm at Spring Forest and serves as its abbess. Reverend Heath earned a PhD in theology and served as a professor at Perkins School of Theology at Southern Methodist University and served as dean and professor of missional and pastoral theology at Duke Divinity School, Duke University. She retired to lead Network Neighborhood Seminary, which she co-founded, and Reverend Heath has authored and co-authored multiple books on healing, trauma, evangelism, Methodist practice, and a new monasticism. She hopes her work as an author, speaker, retreat leader, and consultant, and regenerative farmer, isn't that amazing? This I love. All those things go together. Will help leaders and organizations lean into the healing, liberating, and spiritually transformative journey into which God is calling the church in this new era. Got to get an amen on that last line of that bio. So, and with that, I'm going to turn that over to Elaine.
Hey, Rashinda, just can Denise add one or two pieces to that introduction?
Of
Is that okay?
course, absolutely.
So one of the best books, I love all the books she's written. Missional, Monastic, and Mainline, incredible. And the best title of all her books that she has ever written, Loving the Hell Out of Ourselves. Isn't that great that she and her sister wrote? And it's an amazing book. She is such a fun person. All of those really important things that Rashinda just said are all true. I mean, she's a pretty, I was going to say pretty damn big deal, but I won't say that. I'll just say she's a pretty big deal. And she's a really fun person. She has this great personality and she loves goats. Okay, that's all I'm going to say. Elaine,
Not
take
that
it.
we've set the bar high, but but we love you. Welcome to this space.
Thank you. Thanks to both of you. I really do love goats, and I think all goats go to heaven. Anyway, I'm very glad to be here, and I love what Earth Keepers are about. I haven't gone through that training myself, but I'm pretty sure I could say that the whole project of Spring Forest is an earth keeping, multiple earth keeping projects. What I'm going to do, I'm going to share the screen and just kind of walk very briefly through some slides to show you what Spring Forest is about, what we're doing, and how these threads come together with environmental justice, social justice, leading in a climate changing world, and how do we keep our heads on straight when it feels like the whole world is literally and figuratively on fire right now. So let me do a screen share. There we go. So Spring Forest is a new monastic missional community that's both gathered and dispersed. We are an experimental community in the North Carolina Conference. We are located just outside of Durham and Raleigh and Chapel Hill. We're about 20 minutes from Durham, 20 minutes from Chapel Hill, and 30 minutes from Raleigh. So what we're doing, some people would call a fresh expression, but the Spring Forest is actually the culmination of 20 years of living in intentional community and researching and writing and teaching about and starting experimental communities and networks of communities before. So what we're actually doing, I'm glad you mentioned the mystic way of evangelism, Rashinda. We're Spring Forest, excuse me, is the full flowering of living out the vision found in a mystic way of evangelism. So we are, let me see if I can get this to, wait a minute. Okay, come on. So the pharmastery is the geographic hub for Spring Forest. So our community is both gathered, it's residential, it's gathered locally, and then we also have a digital community that's all over the place. So we have our community, the pharmastery is located on 23 acres that is owned by two couples, my husband and me, and another couple. The 23 acres includes two houses, two tiny houses, a hermitage RV, a safari tent that has a wood burning stove and a dehumidifier in it and electricity. So it's a pretty swanky tent. There are 12 humans, 6 dogs, 3 cats, 8 goats, and 35 chickens, and countless critters, squirrels and whatnot from the woods, and coyotes and all the things. And here are some pictures from Spring Forest, just to give you a taste of the diversity that's here. There's that view, the top left-hand picture is from the front porch of the house that I live in. And the worship setting is from one of our Taizé in the Forest experiences that we have about twice a year. There are some of those goats that I love so much. And then that picture at the bottom right is from last Saturday evening. We had our monthly dinner church called Forest Feast, and we were putting the crop beds to sleep for the winter. So we had a ritual with some prayers, and then the children took compost and laid it alongside the kale to give back to the earth, which has given so much to us. We build into our worship experiences and our liturgical year lots of grounding in the land. And I'm using that word on purpose, grounding in the land. Our dispersed community happens through, we're interconnected with circles and circles of community. We reach across the United States with people who would call us their primary spiritual home, or one of their 2 or 3 homes, because people are postmodern and have multiple spiritual homes now. But we also reach across the world. We have people who regularly participate in things we do online. And so here's a screenshot from morning prayer. We have morning and evening prayer Monday through Friday. We offer online retreats, classes, seminars, web resources, and we are also a teaching community. So we have interns from Duke. We have an intern this year from Perkins School of Theology. We have immersion classes and other learning experiences, and we've partnered with a number of schools to offer learning experiences based on our spirituality and our practice. I really do believe we are at the forefront of a new reformation. And I think everybody here knows that we're never going to go back to what we were like before COVID. That's just not going to happen. And it's not just about COVID, it's about the environment. The climate crisis is so central to everything right now. But part of this new reformation is to repent of all the ways that we objectified everybody and everything that was outside our inner circles. And so here at Spring Forest, we have this little sign hanging by the front door at the Forest House. All are to be welcomed as Christ, and all means everybody. So quite a bit of the work that we do here, the ministry we do here, is reaches beyond the walls, or the reaches beyond the church. That with lavish neighboring, especially supporting refugees who are coming here to be resettled, many of whom are Muslim. So we really believe here at Spring Forest in the interconnection of all things. I know nothing about physics, well, just a little tiny bit about physics, but I know that string theory and some other recent insights in physics demonstrate to us that all things really are interconnected forms of energy. And here's some pictures just to demonstrate how we see interconnections between humans, animals, the earth, the water, the sky here at Spring Forest. So that little baby goat is Wallace. His name is Wallace. He had a tough delivery, and I had to rearrange him, get him back in his mom and rearrange him before he could come out, because he was not going to survive otherwise, and his mom would not have survived the birth. So I named him William Wallace, also known as Braveheart, because he was a brave little boy. And so there's Wallace when he's about 5 minutes old. And Wallace and the other goats live in the barn at night. They live in the fields during the day. They produce manure in the barn at night. We collect the manure a couple times a week, and that becomes the basis for our compost. You can see some of our interns there shoveling compost, and they were actually singing a silly song at the same time, which was kind of fun. So they're shoveling compost. The compost produces fertility, so we can grow organic vegetables and fruit. There's some strawberries from our field. And down at the bottom left-hand corner, you can see a wonderful array of beets from this spring. And we also, so we produce food that we sell, and we produce food that we donate and that we eat ourselves. And so there's a little boy that lives on the farm. He's one of our 12 people. His name's Asa, and he was playing on the swing under the grandmother tree. And Asa eats the beets and he eats the strawberries. So you can see how we're all interconnected just with this snapshot. And this is one of the reasons why Spring Forest, I believe, is so important, even though we're small, we're not fancy, is that we're living out, we're a demonstration plot, as John Perkins would say. We're a demonstration plot for how interconnected everything is. So what goes into the soil gets into our water, gets into our bodies, gets into the animals' bodies, gets into the plants, and so on. Another point in our beliefs here is that there is no them. There's no them, even though we want there to be a them, there's only us. And so we regard our neighbors as people who already have God with them. Our neighbors already are beloved to God, even the hateful ones. God is still active and pursuing them and has a way to reach them. And so we don't regard disciple making or any of that as a matter of trying to get them to become part of us. Instead, we regard our charge to be to live hospitably in humility, neighboring as well as we possibly can for the well-being of our neighbors. And we believe we'll find ourselves as we give ourselves away. So here are some words that might help us get our arms around that. We believe in loving our neighbors, in being as welcoming as we can to all sorts of people, practicing humility, especially cultural humility, because we interact with multiple cultures. And you might remember this word if you took Greek, if you went to seminary, kenosis, that's from the great hymn in Philippians 2, that Christ, though equal with God, did not consider equality something to be grasped, but emptied himself. That Greek word is kenosis. And so we really believe we're called to love with no strings attached. We also understand that the church is to show up in the world as the guest and not the host. So we're not supposed to be the boss of everybody, but we are to be good guests. And we can find theological support for that in Luke chapter 10, when Jesus sends out the first set of disciples. We understand that we're called to be a servant in this world. So here are some pictures from a children's ministry we have that's around nutrition and wellness, that includes yoga, a farm experience, 2 professional chefs. It's multicultural. The bottom left photo is the lead team from Grow It. Our community follows a rule of life, and as Marjorie Thompson says in that classic text, Soul Feast, a rule of life is not about rules and regulations. It's about a scaffolding to help us live well, to live lovingly. And so in our rule of life, there are these 5 parts, and all of us who are on the core team, all of us on the lead team, and those of us who live here are committed to living with this set of practices. We are a practice-based community, not a dogma-based community. And that's one of the things that makes it possible for us to have living here on site among the 12 people. We've got a person who's been seriously harmed by Christianity and is beginning to be a little bit open, but is still mostly closed. We have people who have vibrant faith and active in their church. We have people of no faith at all. We've got a range of perspectives and people's experiences. And when you add in people who are carrying religious trauma, you can imagine how triggering it would be to have a dogma-based community. It just wouldn't work. But by practicing these things together, we can all grow together. The farm is at the geographic center of our farmist area, our geographic hub, and it's so important to everything that we do. So we use regenerative farming methods that heal the land and sequester carbon in the earth. Our CSA, that's a community-supported agriculture where people subscribe to a box of veggies and even eggs every week. We have churches and individuals that sponsor CSA boxes for refugee families for whom having adequate food is always a challenge, especially the first year or 2 when people arrive and have to get settled. And then we have partner churches where we distribute our food, and a café We have now partnered with Farmer Food Share. They'll be buying our excess produce next year. And the revenue stream from the farm, beyond what it costs to run the farm, which is run entirely by volunteers. And as lead farmer, I'm also volunteer. So there are no paid employees now on our farm, but it's beautiful and growing well. So the income that we earn helps to support the rest of the mission of Spring Forest, such as supporting refugees in their resettlement and supporting children's nutrition programming and things like that. This farming activity that we have is our biggest connector to the Triangle region. So imagine a 30-mile radius around Spring Forest. We're very connected with all sorts of people. And it makes it possible for us to have events where people come who've been burnt by church, but really care about the environment. They really care about locally grown food. They really care about family-friendly experiences. So for example, you can see in that top left-hand picture in our barn, those are some of our volunteers that help us pack the veggies every week. So last Saturday in the daytime, we had a group of about 40 or 50 people from Hillsboro, the nearest town, who came out to build lanterns to carry in the solstice night peace walk down by the river, where people from all walks of life carry a little lantern made out of paper mache and pray for peace in the world. And so they came to our barn to build their lanterns. And in being here in our barn, they got to learn about Spring Forest and the things that we do, so that we can form more relationships and partnerships. Here's a photo from one of our days when some of the families came for Grow It. We do quite a few things around refugee support. The newest thing that we're doing is we're developing a culinary training program to help refugee women have catering businesses that can then bring up the economic viability of their families and also give dignity to women who are really wonderful cooks. And that's being headed up by Shema, who's the head of Global Friends. She's a Muslim woman. She's a translator, the different languages spoken in Afghanistan and around that region of the world. And she's on our lead team. So we've done all sorts of things: temporary housing for people, hospitality and immersion events. We have a very robust ESL program with 17 families in it right now. And again, this is ecumenical. We also have educational programs around Indigenous and migrant justice, particularly about forced migration. And as we all know, a lot of the forced migration now is caused by climate change, climate change induced weather disasters, so people are climate refugees. And then we offer ways for people to do hands-on activism and learning at the border and some things like that. There's Shema, and there's our chef Netta at the bottom left-hand corner. We just received a $427,000 grant from the Duke Endowment to be able to hire Chef Netta full-time for 5 years and hire a half-time administrative assistant, so we can multiply our locally grown food, nutrition, and wellness programming that especially reaches vulnerable single moms and their kids. And that's right up Chef Netta's alley. She's a professional chef and a professional nutritionist. And then Shema, I mentioned to you before, there she is. And here's some kids having fun. You can see the kids with the little yoga session at the top left. And then there are those wonderful goats again. And the kids having a forest experience. Here's our lead team for that ministry. It's an international lead team, multiracial and theologically diverse too. We offer an increasing number of children's ministries, including naturalist events for children. We have a nature trail. We have a tree trail now with signs of the different types of trees, so that when people come, they can experience that. And then we have events like mothing, where people come at night. It's quiet and kind of nerdy, like televised bowling or something, but there's a big sheet with lights on it at night, and we've identified, I want to say, more than 200 kinds of moths that are in this area. So families will come, individuals will come, and then lots of other naturalist experiences. We'll have a youth service day on Saturday. We've got a group coming from a church, and they'll learn about cover crops, and they'll help us put one of our farm beds to sleep for the winter. We have an oblate program where people who want to follow our rule of life together, though they live not here, they live somewhere else. And they have an online presence, and they have a retreat and a pilgrimage here once a year, and we do all sorts of wonderful things together. But here's a picture at the top from our last retreat that was sponsored by the Oblates. We work hard to have a trauma-informed lead team. It's not always easy, but here are some features of being a trauma-informed lead team, because communities like Spring Forest do attract people who've been harmed by religion, but who want a spiritual community. And yeah, everybody in these pictures has been through their own story, right? So cultural humility, being anti-racist, LGBTQ plus affirming, having links for therapeutic support as people need that kind of support, sharing power as much as we can, while yet we don't practice a flat consensus. I am appointed here by the bishop. That's our structure in the UMC. And then being as collaborative as we can. All of our theological type people like me are bivocational. None of us earn a living by leading at Spring Forest. Right now, our only paid employees are 2 people who plan events and experiences, and one of them is in recovery. I'll say something about him in a minute. And we try to have a range of people on our lead team so that we're remain sensitive to spiritual but not religious people's concerns, and so on. And we do a lot of teaching here as people are trying to figure out how to create new forms of church that are more in touch with the earth, that are more in touch with people who are marginalized in our society, and who are wanting to have communities where we bring together, because environmental injustice always is worse for people who suffer from social injustice. People who are on the margins suffer the most from environmental disaster. So here's a picture of a retreat we had last year with all the church planters from North Carolina, from both conferences, came for 2 days to learn about this model of ministry. So this is my last slide, and it wouldn't be right if we didn't have a quote from Gandalf: "Not all who wander are lost," of course. And then that top left-hand picture, that's the grandmother tree. It's just this massive, beautiful willow oak. And we had an eldering retreat under that tree a couple of weeks ago, led by Gary Shockley. It was really wonderful. The bottom right-hand picture, this is Justin. He was hoping to be on the call today and tell you his story, but another thing came up that he needed to go to. And so I have his permission. He publicly tells his story. But Justin came here a year and a half ago, absolutely devastated. I knew him from years ago when I worked at Perkins School of Theology. I used to take students to his co-working space to learn about creating community that heals the world, that's beyond the walls of the church. So Justin was the manager of the first co-working space in Dallas, and it was a co-working space especially for social entrepreneurs. He was also the founder of an arts organization called Art Love Magic that brought together all kinds of professional artists with kids who were at risk, and formed mentorships and had these beautiful events that were funded by grants and things like this. So a couple of things happened. COVID started, and just before COVID started, the person who owned the property where the co-working space was sold the property, and the next person who bought it didn't want it to have a co-working space in it. So overnight, Justin lost his business, his job. He lost his arts organization because with COVID, people couldn't meet. When he lost his job, he lost his home because he couldn't pay for it. And then he lost custody of his children because he didn't have a home and he had to live in his car with his dog. And then he suffered from profound depression and became addicted. So it was this sort of cascade of things that happened to him. I didn't know about any of this. And last year in April 23, I started thinking about Justin. I hadn't talked to him for 7 years, and he was coming to mind over and over. And I finally reached out to him on Facebook Messenger and just said, "Hey, you keep coming to mind. Are you okay? What's happening?" And he reached it back out to me right away, and he said he'd been off social media for several years, but he was ready to try to put his life together again. And he told me the story of what happened to him. And then he said, I see on Facebook that you're at a farm. Do you have work that I could do? Do you have any jobs that are available? Because he said, I really need to start over somewhere else, you know. And I said, well, we don't have any money to hire you, but we could do a work share arrangement. If you want to come for the summer, we could use extra help and we'll provide you with room and board. So a few weeks later, he showed up with his dog, Bo, and I knew as soon as I saw him, he needed a lot of support. He was so devastated. So what began then was this wraparound recovery work that involved a whole village of people, professional helpers and our people that are living here. And so Justin has been sober now for 10 months, and he has come back to himself. He's happy. He's so happy. He's in touch with his kids again every week. They're going to be coming out to see him soon. The first thing I did was to get Justin started on the road to healing was to tell him I needed him to help me care for the goats. I didn't need him to help me care for the goats, but he needed to help me care for the goats. And I knew that if he had these living creatures that are so wonderful, if he had them to get up in the morning and to put them in bed, put it in the barn at night and make sure they had what they needed. And if he would work alongside me to make sure the fencing was safe and, all the things that you do, that this would put him in touch with the divine energy that's in the created world, especially with animals, you can have a relationship. And that was what helped him to start to heal. The first few months, it was the goats that helped him start to heal. And today he's working part-time for us as an office manager for Spring Forest, and he's now looking for a real job. The office manager is a real job, but he's now ready to re-enter the workforce. And so much of his recovery has had to do with walking around in the forest, with taking care of the goats, with getting the right kind of help he needed for his physical and mental well-being. But so much of it had to do with the earth healing him, the earth and the animals healing him. And I know that's what he wanted to share with you. So my question for us, what does healing and protecting the natural world have to do with following Jesus? I had somebody today say to me, whose name will not be disclosed, you're not a real new monastic community. It's like a work camp and a commune because of the farm. You're not a real new monastic community. You don't make everybody come to prayer every day. And I said, I don't make people pray ever. I don't think that's right. And what I said was, for us, caring for the land, caring for the farm and the animals and the forest is sacred work. That is a form of prayer for us, in addition to our morning and evening prayers. So this is my question for all of us. What does healing and protecting the natural world have to do with following Jesus? And I'm going to stop screen sharing now. And turn it over to you, Rashinda. I'm going to turn off my sound now.
Okay, yes. And it hit a nerve with I was told once too that I was meditating wrong. Like, oh my goodness, there could be different kinds of Christian prayer. It's so scary. So yes, a monastic life has looked different for different people over hundreds and hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of thousands of years. There's no one way to do it. And so that's funny. So yeah, let that be freedom for you, right? Like if you think, hey, I'd like to enter into doing something, or I'd like to do this, there's no one way to do it. And if God is leading you and you're listening to the people that you love and who care for you and surround you, then you're probably doing okay. So, okay, so I want to actually bring Denise and Pat into the conversation. And Pat is a reverend. They're both ordained in the Methodist tradition. They live in North Carolina as well. Both have been leaders in the work of environmental justice, especially Pat, whose title was Caretaker of the Earth. Or I'm not looking at your bio right now, so I'm messing that up. But this sense of working together and working within Methodism to try to live authentically and sustainably. And that's what they do right now, too. So I'm going to turn it over to Pat and Denise, who are going to have a little bit of a dialogue with Elaine.
Thank you. Elaine, I wonder, I appreciate what you shared, and I wonder if you could share with us what are or what is one of the biggest misconceptions that people have about Spring Forest, either when they come there or when they just hear about it, or they're asking you about it. What's the biggest misconception, or some of the misconceptions that folks have?
Well, there's frequently a misconception about what an intentional community is. There's still a lot of people that say, is it a cult? And we're like, no, we're just boring United Methodists, We're, we're legit United Methodists. That's not a cult. It's legit. So there's often questions about that. But I think one that's a unique question for Spring Forest is it's like that proverb about the elephant, and different people touch different parts of the elephant and can't understand what the elephant is because there's a trunk and there's a tail, and Spring Forest is a little bit like that. We're kind of like a whole collection, a networked collection of fresh expression communities. So like you and Pat, you're linked to us, but we don't own you. But you're part of our community because of morning prayer, and then you have your things you're doing in your own neighborhood that are very consistent with the ethos of Spring Forest. The refugee work. What does refugee support have to do with regenerative farming? Well, it turns out it has a lot to do with regenerative farming, but many people, their imagination has been so colonized to think church has to have pews and an organ and people in a special building, and church is an event on Sunday morning. So the idea of actually living in harmony and with sacred respect for the land and for the wildlife and the domestic animals, that doesn't seem like church to lots of people. That just seems like something else that hippies do. And so trying to connect those dots theologically for people, even the person I was talking with this morning, can be challenging. So we try to talk about, we're kind of like the mycelium network, the fungal network that links everything together. That's the Holy Spirit. And wherever we are gathered, two or three of us together with around our rule of life, then uh, if it's hospitable toward living this way, then the mushrooms form, the fruit happens, the fruit of the spirit, we might say. So anyway, that's my answer.
Yeah.
Thank you. So I do have a question, but before I ask it to all of you on the Zoom, if you have a question for Elaine, just put it in the chat, and we'll try to pay attention to your questions as well. So for me, Elaine, I just love what you have to say about the land and the animals, and very clear that you live in relationship to God's creation. And that's a lot of what it's all about for me. Um, but I would love to hear you talk, and I assume there's lots of motivations for why you and Spring Forest care so deeply for the land, and for God's creation at large. Um, and I'm sure there's that your theology is a part of that motivation. I would love to hear you talk a little bit more theologically, and sort of your own personal theology of why for you it's important theologically.
Well, I could cite a few different sources off the top of my head that have been influential in my thinking. I think about Bonaventure, the disciple of Francis of Assisi, and Bonaventure's treatise on the 6 days of creation and so on. And so Bonaventure articulated something he learned from Francis, which is that uh, every single detail of the natural world, we'll use the language natural world, he would say creation, is a unique, unrepeatable footprint of God. that reveals to us what God is, who God is, what God cares about, what God is like. And then he says that Christ is the exemplar, like the fullest manifestation of a creation, of the creation that shows us what God is like. And so Bonaventure said that there are different books of God. The first book of God is creation itself, is the earth and all the things in the earth. The second book is the Bible, so that would have been the Pentateuch, the Hebrew Bible. And then Christ, the incarnate God, is the next word of God, is the next and the fullest revelation of God to us. So my thinking goes along those lines. I'm also shaped by Julian of Norwich's beautiful, hopeful vision that came out of her experience, her deathbed experiences of God coming to her in these visions. And she was very surprised because she expected God to be mad at everybody because that's what she was taught in her 14th century British context, English context. But she finds out that God's meaning is love, and that God made all things and sustains all things and will hold all things because of love. So she has this vision of the hazelnut. Her theology has been very influential for me. The Bible itself is filled with agrarian and natural world images. I think of how God starts to finally says something to Job after everything, after these nitwit friends and all the things that happened. And what does God say? Finally, Job's going to get some answers, and God doesn't answer the question. God just says, "Have you thought about?" And he starts naming animals like ostriches, because Job needed to get out of himself and be in the wonder and the marvel, the mystery of the created world, the mystery of nature as it actually is, in order to get out of this stuck places in his head theologically that were caused by trauma. So there's that. I think of John Woolman, the Quaker, who was the first person ever to write something linking slavery and the abuse of animals to the problem of what we would call capitalism. John Woolman, hundreds of years ago, writing about this. I just think about the indigenous traditions from around the world, and today we really need indigenous wisdom to lead the way. That everything in the world, everything that exists is just shimmering with the presence of God. But do we have the eyes to see it? Do we have the heart to recognize it? This earth is our only home. And if we take seriously the gospel mandate to love our neighbors as ourselves, then it doesn't have to do with our home. It's our one home. And why are we passive about or complicit in destroying our only home for ourselves and our neighbors? Taking out more than we can put back, and all of those things. So there are a number of influences, Pat, that have shaped my theology. But perhaps beneath all those, before I ever had gone to first grade, was growing up in my family, which was a traumatic family, is full of all kinds of things, where I found solace and life and what I now know is called worship, where I found an interaction with the divine that was palpable, was climbing trees, was being by the river, was seeing the dappled light, was holding a little animal in my arms. That's where I felt the presence of God. And so I think my love for all of this it really started there. Yeah.
Okay, so one follow-up question, and this is the hard question. So how can the United Methodist Creation Justice Movement enable the institution of the United Methodist Church to embrace everything that you just said?
In 3 easy steps.
Okay. Well, I think you've done a great job of moving from a handful of people to thousands, Pat. So we're seeing some progress, helped along by climate change, right? I mean, we're just seeing those disasters now. One way that would be very creative is if this movement could partner with Fresh Expressions. Fresh Expressions is a church planting initiative that has to do with developing small, localized, contextualized faith communities that are small, local, contextualized, that aren't necessarily led by clergy, or that are led by teams of bivocational clergy and other people. That's kind of where Spring Forth comes in. Because if we can move across the siloing and have your movement join in with Fresh Expressions, I think you'd find ready listening people ready to collaborate, so that more of the Fresh Expressions are oriented around taking good care of the earth, activism and advocacy and action to take care of the earth. We would find people that could work together. I think trying to change it from a top-down approach is probably doomed, just because really this is a revolution of sorts, and that revolutions always work from the edges and the bottom and work their way up. How is that?
That was good. Thanks.
Okay.
So how do folks who don't have farm, who don't have land, who aren't as connected as you are, how can they begin to create something like this in their own place, in their own homes, in their own community?
Well, when we started doing this kind of work, we didn't have a farm either. We lived in the city and we had a backyard. And I worked at Southern Methodist University. So some things that I did and that my husband and I did, we developed a garden in our backyard that became part of a retreat space for people to come to, because our home became a hub, kind of a mother house for a network of new monastic communities. So we included gardening in the activities people would do when they came for retreat at our house, for example. We attended a large United Methodist church that had no interest in creation care. They didn't know about it. They just thought if they could recycle a few bottles, they did their duty. Okay, so we started a ministry called Journey Earth in that local church. That was a monthly experience that included an educational component and an action component. So we did things like cleaning up the creek that was full of litter. And out of Journey Earth, the church started a really large community garden for the city on church property that they had that wasn't being used. And it might still be going. I don't know. I haven't checked into that recently, but community gardening can be a place where this kind of care can also be taught and modeled. I started a community garden on campus at Southern Methodist University. It was not a very large garden, but there was so much interest. It really surprised me. I wanted to have it so that I could teach classes on eco-spirituality and I could have an actual land experience that students could have as part of their work. But within a few weeks of getting that garden rolling, people from across the university they were curious, they came, what are you doing? Can I be a part of this? And pretty soon there was this whole network of people that had nothing to do with the School of Theology that were active in the garden. And then when we started supporting refugees in their resettlement in Dallas, I would bring them over to work in the garden, and it was so good for their trauma, because there was familiar vegetables from home back in Congo and other places where they came from. So there's so much we can do that doesn't require having a whole farm. We can do something with our yard. We can do something with our church space to do an educational project that's hands-on, that's community-based, it's a hospitality space for a neighborhood. And it can be, if we're thoughtful about it, we can teach creation care and not just have a garden that people volunteer in, but actually have themes and events and things like that go with it.
Thank you. And I think folks are longing for that. Folks are longing for just having relationship with each other and doing that outside, which we don't often do even in the church. So yeah. Judith, you had your hand up. Would you like to ask your question?
Well, a question and comment. Back in 1976, I went to Pacific School of Religion in Berkeley as a Congregationalist, got completely turned off on organized religion. It was the height of feminist theology. ended up becoming a Quaker, ended up going to Nevada County, which is where John Woolman School was located. And my husband and I were part of a kind of community where our land was not contiguous with this group from of Southern California Quakers who had come up to Nevada County. Anyway, watching kind of the demise of this number one, John Woolman School and the community over the years makes me just wonder, what makes this kind of community fail and what makes it succeed. Just off the top of my head, for one thing, I wasn't doing anything professional. So I found the work on the ranch to be pretty hard and missed the professional stimulation and even accolades at the time. So I ended up going back to work in Sacramento. But looking at the people who were still doing this work, I do think the leadership of the UMC structure, which I resisted for years until I became a UMC clergy person, is important here. I think one of the reasons this all failed in Grass Valley and Nevada City was because of the consensus model of Quakerism.
Yep. Yes, I agree. I agree. Gosh, where to begin? I've done a long study of what makes communities successful, or what makes them fail and what makes them work, and kind of what are the elements that need to be considered if you're going to develop a community. One of the necessary ingredients is some kind of rule of life that attends to our inner life and that attends to giving ourselves away. So I often think of like prayer, hospitality, and justice. Like we need some kind of meditation, some kind of contemplative life together, some kind of giving ourselves away and welcoming people as they are, and then doing the hard work of justice around the earth, around specific social justice, whatever our community is called to be involved in contextually. Those elements should be there. We also need contact with the outside world so we don't build a compound outside of Waco and do crazy things, right? Monasticism, or some version of it, which, by the way, early Methodism was a lay monastic movement. They didn't use that language for themselves, but I can make a very strong case for that, including Wesley, who was accused of being a closet Jesuit. But monasticism always flourishes. There's like a flowering of it whenever the church is losing its way. And when you've got this sort of confluence of the church losing its way, like we see right now on the national scene with right-wing nationalist politics, the church losing its way, and with you combine that with wars and famines and other things that cause chaos in society, that's when the mystics and the prophets and the new monastic movements come up. So I'm not sure all of them are meant to last very long. They are meant to come up and be a prophetic voice and a healing presence to spark change. And then if they only last 10 years or 20 years and then they've reached their life cycle, it's okay. It's really okay. I know the Koinonia Farm community in Americus, Georgia, is trying to figure out anew who are they going to be now, because it's a whole new era now. And I could tell you lots of stories of other communities. But in terms of your comment, Judith, about the consensus model killing the, yes, I see that happen. And from time to time, someone will come into our community, whether they live here or they don't live here, they come to things that we do. Usually it's people coming to things that we do, and they think this is the right place for me. And then when they realize that we don't use flat consensus for decision making, we do collaborate and talk to each other, but we do have a United Methodist structure. And then that makes them mad and they leave because they can't control, because you can control a consensus thing by being stubborn. And then what do you do when you've got this one holdout who wants to have everything their way? So I think being clear about the structure. So we although we don't have a rubric in United Methodism for monasticism, So we're called a mission church by the, like, but everyone knows we're a new monastic community with lots of missional things. But we have a team that functions like an SPRC. I am the appointed senior pastor to this community using traditional rubrics. And so being clear about that structure can help to prevent unnecessary conflict and unnecessary expectations not being met, let's say.
Church is messy, and the processes that we've set up are meant to be a little bit elastic, and it's really heartening, I think, that we can see that elasticity in these different iterations of church as we explore them without the need to have them like ironed in like creases on a pleated skirt. So yeah, I really appreciate that exchange. I want to shift us to preparation for our breakout rooms. What we're going to do today for breakout rooms is really create a kind of a prayerful space. One of the things that happens at Spring Forest Farm is the spiritual, we're just talking about church, the spirituality of it and the welcoming of people to come and participate in morning prayer and other kinds of prayerful activities. And so I've pulled out a couple of intercessory prayers from what is available on the website, and we'll have links for you. And Pat and Denise will also be sharing part of that prayer. And then there'll be 3 prompts, which we'll put in the chat and send folks off to small group to just share with each other. Either the prompt or, however that skirt may flow. It's not a pleated skirt, so you can find your way to that reflection time together, but the prompts are there also to support that effort. So I'm going to begin with the reading. We come this day to offer our prayers for others, our world, and ourselves. This journey we call life is often chaotic, filled with tensions and muchness. We pause today to seek refuge in your love and forgiving grace.
We know the world around us is not at rest. There is violence and fear, sorrow and devastation. So many things that tear us apart and keep us up at night. We lift our prayers today for the brokenness and pain. We pray for the world, others, and ourselves to find strength and rest for the journey. Christ, we seek the peace that passes all understanding in the midst of all that is.
Living Christ, we draw from the strength of our community and look outward to our world. We join those early Christ followers in asking for your strong hand of healing to stretch out in power. We pray for acts of reconciliation and goodness to be done in this world. Miraculous restoration we cannot yet imagine, acts that can only be done through your power and our faithfulness in joining your work of love.
Amen. Okay, so now usually we have the breakout rooms headed by somebody and the invitation to choose a breakout room. This time you're going to have click on the link. It will take you to a breakout room where you're going to share with about 2 to 4 other folks. And I'm going to pop these are our prompts, and I'm going to open all rooms. Here we go. Hello, everyone. Welcome back from the breakout rooms. So I'm going to bring us back with a gratitude prayer, and then we'll invite you to share a little bit. So our prayer of gratitude on returning is, for the first light we glimpsed this day, for the warm drink or food we've eaten, for the love we received from these our siblings, for the work we will turn to at the close of our prayers, we give thanks. And again, that is a prayer from the Spring Forest community. And so I just wanted to see, to give people got a couple minutes to just share How did that go for you in the breakout room? And
One person,
I will just say what I shared in with our little group was just that I've never stayed for one of the breakout rooms, and it was just really so encouraging and wonderful. Wonderful to actually meet a few people that live across the country, and I'll definitely try to do it again.
oh, I'm glad. I'm really glad. That is what we find, but it's a courage thing. It's being courageous to spend that kind of time together. Anyone else want to share a reflection for? Oh, Fawn, I see your hand up. Go ahead.
Okay. Yeah, I'm on. Okay, great. Amy Fusilier is the director of Sauger Brown, which is a community in Louisiana. And she sent me her email because we just had such a great, fast conversation. We only answered we answered one question. We moved into what she's doing. And she's got relief kits and involved with the community. And I was like, wow, that's exactly what Dr. Elaine was talking about. We're in a new reformation here. This is great stuff. So that's what we talked about. It was great.
Anyone else like to reflect on? Or Elaine, if you have any last thing that you would like to share, you're welcome to do that too.
Maybe could I ask one
Uh,
last?
I see
May I?
Amy,
One
Amy
last.
has her,
Go ahead.
Oh,
Amy
sorry.
You know
has her
what?
hand up.
Denise, Judy, let's do Denise and then Judy.
Yeah, Elaine, I wondered if I could ask you just one last question as we end, but if you could paint for us a picture of how you would envision the local church or the institutional church in the next 20 years.
well, the trend, I think 20 years from now, there will be far fewer congregations. Some of the larger churches will continue to be large. They will also have to reiterate themselves as society is rapidly changing, and we're headed for some really tumultuous times over the next several years. So we're going to see a decline in the numbers of congregations. We're going to see an increase in the numbers of experiments like Spring Forest and other kinds of experiments, fresh expression kinds of things. Lots of them won't last very long, but they're still really important no matter how long they last, because we're evolving into a new era. And as we learn from the natural world, when flies are evolving, for example, there will be a lot of flies that don't make it and keep replicating the same modification, but eventually the flies will be able to adapt to the new situation. There's something like that happening with us now with church. I think I've been told, I'll just tell you what I've been told. Do you all know who Paul Nixon is? Have you heard of Paul? He's a church plant coach. He's very well known across the country and across the pond. So Paul was here. I've known him for a long time. And he says that Spring Forest is right down the middle of the fairway of what church will look like in 20 years. Like what we're doing here is going to be like normal church in 20 years. Our bishop has said the same thing in several public gatherings where I've been present, where she's just talked about, not that everybody's going to have a farm and some goats and all that, but the sense of deeply connected to the earth, really about loving our neighbors, bivocational leadership, some sort of a rule of life, some of these things that can transfer across contexts, so that I hope that's helpful. Yeah.
That's great. Thank you. Judy, we have room for just one more, and then we're going to be ready to pray out to on with the work. Go ahead, Judy.
Well, I just saw Amy's hand up, and I don't know if she still has a question, but wanted to make sure. Oh, she doesn't. Okay. So that was the main thing. And I just appreciate the resources we shared in our group. So thanks.
Okay, wonderful. And speaking of resources, I am going to be pasting some links into the chat right now. And we do have one last final prayer. But I do want to give Elaine one more chance. Is there anything you'd like to say before we close our cafe today?
I want to recommend two resources that we all need. One of them is Brian McLaren's book, Life After Doom. we all need to read that or listen to it and then talk about it together in small groups and put together some action plans based on what we're reading. Then I want to recommend the work of the BTS Center. One of our members of Spring Forest lives in a small island off the coast of Maine, Chebeague Island, and is a research director at the BTS Center, which is Spiritual Leadership in a Climate Changed World. And they work across religions. But the BTS Center has resources that are directly relevant to everything that your group is about and that we're about at Spring Forest. So you could find some helpful resources there for leadership in your congregational context, whatever it might be, relative to all things having to do with climate change. And thank you for being here and inviting me to be with you today. I really appreciate it.
Oh, so glad you're here. Thank you for saying yes to the invitation. Thank you also to Denise and Pat for helping steward the relational work to bring this about. I don't have the BTS Center link. Let me see if we can find it. But fun fact, it used to be a seminary and they reimagined themselves in a new way, in new context. And so they are not just talking about leadership, they are living it. And so that's a really important thing. So, all right, my love and blessing to everyone. I'm going to turn it over to Dawn to pray us out.
Thank you. Okay, let us pray. Our Heavenly Father, thank you for this time today and for Dr. Heath and all her wonderful work at Spring Forest. Please, as always, help us to remember that everything in your creation is connected, for we all share a common origin in your created hand. Fill us with a spirit of praise, gratitude, wisdom, and courage that we might care for creation and not misuse it. Ensure that its goods are shared in justice with all our brothers and sisters, and always speak out on its behalf whenever it is threatened. Amen.
Thank you all.
Thank you. Happy Thanksgiving, everyone.